Everyone joined guilds to survive, and I was the idiot standing alone in the recruitment square with a cracked wooden club, one stale biscuit, and a talent rating so low the tower crystal coughed before showing it. My name was Logan. Before the apocalypse tower swallowed the city, I was the kind of guy who got winded carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs. After the tower appeared, everybody said the same thing. Get into a guild or die on the first floor. Guilds meant food. Guilds meant healers. Guilds meant someone else getting stabbed first while you pretended it was teamwork. So when the recruitment bell rang, I lined up with everyone else and tried to look useful. The first guild tested my grip strength. The crystal measured it, flashed a sad little number, and the recruiter asked if I had accidentally used only one finger. The second guild asked me to swing a sword, and I hit the practice dummy so badly the dummy's damage report said emotional discomfort. The third guild did not even test me. They looked at my status, looked at my shoes, and told me their emergency food division was full. By sunset, all the strong people had banners pinned to their armor. Mason walked past me wearing a polished badge from the biggest guild in the square, smiling like he had personally invented muscles. Brooke stood behind him in healer robes, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Vera watched from the balcony above the registry, calm and sharp-eyed, already collecting talented players like rare cards. Mason pointed at my cracked club. He asked if I was planning to beat monsters or apologize to them. People laughed, even the tower torches flickered like they wanted to join in. I told myself I did not care. Then my stomach growled so loud a child offered me half a mushroom. That was how my climb began, not with a legendary sword, not with a dragon bloodline, not with a secret master. Just hunger, humiliation, and a tower rule nobody bothered reading because everyone was too busy signing guild contracts. At midnight, the recruitment square emptied. Guilds marched into their camps. Solo players were supposed to report to the discard barracks, a freezing stone room with broken beds and a sign that said unaffiliated participants are responsible for their own survival. The sign was meant as a warning. I read it like a dare. Because underneath the sign, almost hidden behind mold, there was tiny silver text. Unattached player adjustment active. I stared at it, the words shimmered when nobody else looked. I brushed the mold away and more text appeared. To preserve competitive balance, unaffiliated players receive scaling advantages based on isolation risk, resource denial, party exclusion, and raid access restriction. I did not understand half of it, but I understood advantage. First bonus appeared when I touched the discard barracks door. Shop access discount, 90%. Enemy attention reduced outside direct attacks. Loot ownership cannot be contested by non-party members. Solo achievement chain unlocked. I blinked at the door, then I looked at the guild camps, where people were celebrating with hot soup they had not earned yet. For the first time all day, I smiled. The tower wanted everyone to join guilds, but it also hated unfair math, and if there was one thing I understood from being weak my whole life, it was unfair math. Next morning, the first floor opened. Thousands of players flooded into the stone meadow, packed in guild formations, shouting commands like they were already heroes. I followed far behind with my cracked club, and bought my first item from a ghostly shop window only I could see. Everyone else paid 10 tower coins for a basic dagger. I paid 1. Everyone else paid 5 coins for rope. I paid half a coin and got a free spool of wire because the shop rounded pity in my favor. Everyone else bought healing salves. I bought cooking oil, pepper dust, fishing hooks, glue, and a tiny bronze bell labeled mostly useless. The shop even tried to apologize for my life by giving me a coupon. On the meadow, the guilds charged wild, horned rabbits like an army. Those rabbits were the size of dogs, their teeth were knives, and their eyes looked personally offended by human civilization. Big guilds formed shield walls. They shouted, they coordinated. Then one rabbit jumped over the shields and bit a swordsman in a place that made every man in the meadow cross his legs. I hid behind a boulder and watched. The rabbits ignored me. At first I thought they were blind. Then one hopped 2 feet away, sniffed, looked directly at me, and turned around to chase Mason instead. Reduced enemy attention. I could not win by fighting like everyone else, but I did not need to. I tied fishing hooks to wire, rubbed them with cooking oil, and stretched them between stones at rabbit ankle height. Then I rang the mostly useless bell. The rabbits did not care about me, but they hated the bell. When charged, it slipped. The hook caught its ear. It spun, crashed into another rabbit, and both rolled into the glue puddle I had spread over a patch of dry grass. I hit them with the club until the club broke, then used half the club as a stabbing stick. It was not noble, it was not beautiful. I looked like a starving janitor murdering haunted luggage. But the tower message appeared. Solo kill confirmed, experience bonus applied, first unaffiliated victory achieved, loot ownership secured. A rabbit fang dropped, along with 3 coins, a strip of meat, and a ridiculous little cloak made of rabbit fur. Nearby, a guild squad killed 12 rabbits and started arguing over who deserved the fangs. The archer said he did most of the damage. The tank said damage was useless without him. The healer said everyone would be dead without her. Mason shouted that leadership deserved a larger cut. While they argued, another rabbit attacked them from behind. I cooked my rabbit meat on a flat stone and ate it while wearing my ugly little cloak. That was the first lesson of the tower. A guild could multiply strength, but it also multiplied opinions, and opinions were heavy. By the end of the first day, I had killed 7 rabbits with traps, accidents, and one complicated plan involving pepper dust and a rabbit sneezing itself into a hole. My level rose twice. My stats barely improved, but my bonuses stacked. The solo shop offered me a new category called Disgrace Compensation. Inside was a dagger that returned to my hand if thrown, but only if nobody saw me throw it with confidence. It was cheap because the tower considered it embarrassing. I bought it instantly. The second floor was a ruined market full of goblins. Guilds loved the second floor because goblins carried coins and hated rules. It was perfect for organized raids. At least that was what everyone said, until the goblins started using receipts. They were not strong, but they were annoying. They hid in stalls, threw rocks, stole boots, and filed fake complaints in a language nobody understood. Guild squads chased them through alleys and got ambushed by carts, nets, and one goblin riding another goblin like a horse. I entered alone and discovered my lower enemy attention worked even better in crowds. Goblins noticed armored guild players first. They noticed loud players second. They noticed me somewhere after loose cabbage and before decorative bricks. So I became a decorative brick with a plan. I watched Mason's guild push into the central market. Their formation was clean. Their weapons were shiny. Their confidence was so thick I could have used it as wall paste. Mason raised his sword and ordered everyone to charge the goblin chief's stall. The goblins dropped a sign that read clearance sale. Half the guild slowed down. That was enough. Nets fell, carts rolled, a barrel exploded into rotten soup. Mason screamed orders while slipping through vegetables. I climbed onto a roof, crawled across broken tiles, and reached the back of the goblin chief's stall while everyone else entertained him from the front. The chief was huge, green, and wearing a crown made from stolen spoons. He guarded a locked chest with both hands. I could not fight him. I could barely fight a shopping basket. So I bought a customer complaint form from the solo shop for 1 coin. The item description said goblins respect paperwork for unknown cultural reasons. I filled it out badly. I accused the chief of improper soup labeling, unlawful spoon monarchy, and excessive screaming near customers. Then I dropped it through a hole in the roof. The chief froze. He picked up the form, his eyes widened. He shrieked. He ran to a back office and started stamping papers with both fists. I dropped behind the stall, opened the chest with a discounted lockpick, and found a skill book called Leftover Claim. The skill let me claim items abandoned during chaotic combat, as long as nobody in my party objected. I had no party. I learned it. Then I took the chief's spoon crown too, because it was technically unattended. And Mason's group finally broke through. The goblin chief returned with a folder of legal responses and no treasure. Mason saw me on the roof wearing the spoon crown like a lunatic. He accused me of stealing their raid loot. The tower replied for me, loot ownership secured by solo claim, no party conflict detected. Mason looked like he had swallowed a cactus. I waved the spoon crown at him and left before he remembered he was stronger than me. On the 3rd floor, the tower introduced raid gates. These were massive doors that required minimum party size. Guild players cheered because it meant solo trash like me would finally stop sneaking around. Mason even waited by the first gate just to watch me fail. The gate demanded 5 registered members. I placed my hand on it alone. It rejected me so hard I slid 6 feet backward. Everyone laughed again. For 1 second I felt the old panic rising. Maybe the bonuses were just leftovers. Maybe there really was a wall I could not climb. The guilds entered one by one, leaving me outside in the dark corridor with nothing but my cheap dagger, rabbit cloak, and spoon crown. Then I noticed something. Every raid gate had a maintenance seam. Not a secret door, not a glowing button, just a thin line near the bottom where the tower stone shifted slightly whenever a party entered. I crouched down and pressed my ear to it. Inside, I heard gears resetting after every group. The solo shop appeared. Raid exclusion compensation available. The item for sale was a chalk stick called Imaginary Teammate Marker. The description said, draws fake party shadows, does not fool intelligent beings, works on doors with poor emotional awareness. I bought 5. I drew 4 stick figures on the ground beside me. One had a sword, one had a staff, one had a square head, one was just a circle with legs because I was rushing. Then I placed my hand on the gate and whispered clearly and confidently that my party was ready. The gate counted my shadows. It opened. Mason was not there to see it, but I imagined his face and enjoyed myself anyway. Inside was the Boar Chapel, a cracked temple where a boss called the Iron Tusk Boar charged anything that moved. Guilds were fighting it in rotations. Tanks held shields. Damage dealers struck the legs. Healers screamed at people to stop standing in front of the tusks, which sounded obvious, but apparently heroic people needed reminders. I entered through a side passage and immediately realized the boss barely cared about me. He could sense me, but my reduced attention made me feel like a small tax form in a burning office. Annoying, but not urgent. So I watched the raid. The boar had a pattern. Charge, stomp, roar, swipe, rest. Everyone attacked during rest. Simple, too simple. The real danger was not the boar, it was loot greed. Every guild wanted the final strike. Mason's group fought beside 2 other squads, and none of them trusted each other. They wasted more energy blocking rival attacks than damaging the boss. I climbed to the rafters. I used rope, hooks, and the returning dagger to cut down old iron bells hanging above the altar. Then I waited. Boar reached low health. Mason shouted for everyone to hold attacks so his guild could finish it. The other squads ignored him. Brooke tried to keep people alive. Vera's banner appeared at the doorway, and her elite players stepped in late, fresh and smiling, ready to claim what exhausted people had weakened. That was when I rang my mostly useless bell. The boar looked up. I dropped the iron chapel bell. It smashed onto the boar's head, stunning it for exactly 3 seconds. I jumped from the rafter, threw my dagger with absolutely no confidence, and because the dagger respected emotional honesty, it flew crooked, bounced off a pillar, hit the boar's cracked eye, and returned to my hand. The boar collapsed. Solo contribution exceeded party threshold. Raid exclusion compensation applied. Solo clear assist recognized. Loot ownership secured. The entire chapel went silent. Then treasure exploded around me. Not around the guilds, around me. Coins, tusks, armor plates, a ring, and a skill stone fell into a glowing circle only I could touch. The guild players stared as if the tower had personally insulted their ancestors. Mason stepped toward me with his sword drawn. The tower flashed a warning above him. Contesting secured solo loot will trigger theft penalty. He stopped so fast his boots squealed. I picked up the ring. It was called Boar Patience. It reduced damage taken while standing still, which sounded useless until I remembered I spent most fights hiding like furniture. I put it on. Brooke met my eyes across the chapel. She looked relieved and worried at the same time. Mason looked like he was trying to kill me using only forehead veins. I left through the side gate, carrying enough loot to buy dinner for a week. That night the guild camps changed. People stopped laughing openly. They whispered instead. Whispers were worse because whispers grew teeth. My morning rumors said I had stolen a hidden class, bribed the tower, cursed the boss, seduced a goblin accountant, or died and returned as a deck ghost. I liked the deck ghost one. Mason liked none of them. He blocked me near the communal fountain with 3 guild members behind him. He told me solo players did not belong in raids. He said my loot came from their work. He said if I had honor, I would hand over the board drops. I asked if honor accepted installment payments. He grabbed my cloak. The tower did nothing. He had not attacked me. He was just being a very athletic nuisance. So I used my newest skill. Leftover claim activated. The grip he had on my cloak counted as contested contact. My cloak had rabbit fur. Rabbit fur was loot. My loot ownership flared, and the tower identified Mason's hand as an unauthorized claim attempt. A tiny lightning bolt struck his fingers. It was not lethal. It did make him yelp like a stepped-on flute. Everyone saw. I straightened my cloak and walked away, while the fountain reflected the first tiny piece of fear in Mason's eyes. The 4th floor was a maze full of whispering mirrors. Guilds hated it because reflections copied teams unevenly. If 5 players entered a hall, 5 reflections appeared, but the reflections copied their worst habits. A greedy fighter got a greedier mirror. A coward got a coward who ran faster. A liar got a liar who knew better lies. I entered alone. 1 reflection appeared. It looked like me, except healthier, taller, and less damp. I immediately disliked him. He said I was only winning because the tower pitied me. He said the bonuses were training wheels. He said when real monsters appeared, clever tricks would crack. I asked him why he had my face, but Mason's personality. Then I threw pepper dust at the mirror. The reflection sneezed. I tackled it into a wall. It fought like me, which meant it was weak, desperate, and full of bad ideas. We rolled across broken glass, both trying to bite each other's sleeves. Finally, I used the boar patience ring, stopped moving at the exact second he lunged, and let his punch glance off me. Then I hit him with the spoon crown. The mirror cracked. Solo self-conquest achieved, reflection defeated without party assistance, doubt resistance increased. I expected a stat boost. Instead, the tower gave me a passive called Quiet Feet. It made my steps harder to notice when I was not trying to be heroic. Perfect. Farther into the maze, I found guild squads turning on themselves. Mirrors whispered about loot splits. Reflections faked orders. Players attacked the wrong targets. Mason's group was trapped in a hall where every mirror showed him being betrayed. The funny thing was, the mirrors did not need to lie much. Brooke was cornered by a reflection of herself that kept healing enemy mirrors just to prove a point. She was exhausted, staff shaking, while Mason shouted for her to heal him first. I should have kept walking. Brooke was in Mason's guild. She had watched people laugh at me. She had said nothing. But she had also looked guilty. And guilt was just kindness moving slowly. I crawled along the ceiling beams, dropped a glue bomb onto the healer reflection, and cut the strap on a hanging mirror. Mirror fell, reflected the reflection, and the two copies became so busy arguing about who deserved to help first that Brooke escaped. She looked up and saw me hanging upside down from a beam. I told her not to mention it. She asked why I helped. I said healers were expensive in the shop. That was not the real answer, but it was close enough for a tower full of people who converted everything into price. On the way out, Brooke whispered that Mason had ordered his guild to watch me. He wanted to find a way to force me into a party, then claim my bonuses were shared resources. I thanked her. She tried to give me a healing salve. I refused because accepting it might count as party support, and I did not trust rules I had not bent yet. So she threw it at my head. I dodged badly. It hit my forehead and healed a cut. No party formed. I decided Brooke was dangerous in a different way. The 5th floor was where the tower stopped being funny for a while. It was a city of black rain, full of skeletal dogs that hunted by sound. The guilds built barricades and moved in armored caravans. Food became scarce. Prices rose. People who had laughed on the first day now stood in soup lines and counted arrows. Guild leaders started taxing members for protection. Strong players ate meat. Weak players ate promises. I had my solo shop, but even discounted food cost something. The black rain ruined fires, rusted weapons, and made everyone miserable. Lower enemy attention helped, but the dogs still attacked if I made noise. For 2 days I survived on dried rabbit, rainwater, and spite. Then I found the floor's trick. Skeletal dogs were not chasing sound. They were chasing rhythm. Footsteps, marching, shield knocks shouted orders. Guilds moved like drums, so dogs swarmed them. I moved quietly, but if I could create rhythm somewhere else, I could control the hunt. I bought cheap bells, so many bells the solo shop asked if I needed emotional support. I tied them to broken umbrellas, rolling wheels, dangling ropes, and one extremely confused skeleton dog tail I found after a guild battle. Then I set them around the city in timed patterns, using dripping rain gutters to pull strings. At midnight, the entire floor became a concert of stupid little bells. The dogs went insane. They sprinted from alley to alley, chasing sound ghosts. Guild caravans suddenly had breathing room. I followed the dogs from behind, collecting bones, coins, and abandoned supplies with leftover claim whenever players dropped packs during panic. By dawn, I had enough materials to craft a weapon. The tower offered me 3 options: a bone sword, a bone spear, a bone bow. I chose bone umbrella. The tower paused before accepting, like even it needed a second. Bone umbrella could block rain, unfold into a shield, and snap shut on enemy limbs. It also made me look like a depressed office worker at a demon parade. I loved it. When Mason found out someone had redirected the dog packs away from the weak camps, he claimed credit in front of everyone. He stood on a crate, said his strategy had protected the floor, and demanded increased supply taxes. I was standing in the crowd wearing a rabbit cloak, spoon crown, and bone umbrella. I raised my hand. Then I dropped a bag of tiny bells at his feet. The bells rang. Every skeletal dog within 3 streets turned toward him. Mason's speech ended early. He ran, the crowd scattered. I stepped under my umbrella and walked the opposite direction while the dogs chased the loudest hero in the city. Brooke later told me nobody believed Mason after that. I told her that was unfair. Mason had provided excellent cardio leadership. The 6th floor introduced safe rooms. Each guild received a private room with beds, storage, and locked doors. Solo players received nothing. Or so everyone thought. When I stepped onto the floor, a hidden notice appeared. Denied housing compensation active, portable rest point unlocked. The solo shop sold me a doorknob. Just a doorknob. The description said attached to any wall thinner than 3 feet to create a temporary room. Warning, room quality depends on self-worth. I attached it to a cracked wall and opened it. Inside was a closet with 1 blanket, a bucket, and a motivational poster that said probably tomorrow. I stared at it for a long time. Then I upgraded my self-worth by placing the boar tusk ring on a shelf, hanging the spoon crown like decoration, and cooking soup over a smokeless flame. The room expanded by 6 inches. Good enough. Safe rooms changed the tower politics. Guilds could store loot, rest, and plan. They also started spying on each other. Storage keys were copied. Contracts were forged. Alliances formed at breakfast and collapsed by dinner. Vera thrived there. She ran the cleanest guild operation in the tower. Her players were polished, fed, and terrified of disappointing her. She never raised her voice. She did not need to. When Vera looked at people, they confessed crimes they had only considered. She approached me outside the trading hall. She offered protection, resources, and access to her strategists. In exchange, I would register under her banner. She promised I could keep some independence. Some independence, that was like offering someone some oxygen. I refused. She smiled like I had made the answer interesting. Next day, every merchant in the public hall doubled prices for me. Vera had not threatened them. She had simply bought their loyalty. The guilds could pressure human sellers even if the tower shop favored me. So I stopped using human sellers. I turned my portable room into a tiny black market counter. I used the solo shop to buy discounted basics, then repackaged them as survival bundles for desperate unaffiliated players and low-ranking guild members. Not at cruel prices, just fair ones which looked cheap compared to guild taxes. I accepted payment in broken gear, monster parts, rumors, and embarrassing information. At the end of the week, I knew which guild was hoarding antidotes, which raid captain was afraid of frogs, which storage room had a loose hinge, and which players were planning to betray Mason before Mason betrayed them. First, I did not have a guild. I had receipts. That was better. Riley found me during that week. I noticed the shadow before the person. Quiet feet recognized quiet feet, and the hairs on my neck stood up while I was sorting bone needles. A hand reached from behind a shelf toward my coin pouch. I snapped the bone umbrella shut on the wrist. Riley dropped from the ceiling, grinned through pain, and said that was rude. I asked why a thief was smiling inside a trap. Riley said smiling made people underestimate the bleeding. That was how we became enemies for about 8 minutes, then trading partners for slightly longer. Riley was not in a guild either, but not because guilds rejected them. He had joined 3 guilds and stolen from all 3 before lunch. The tower had marked them with a betrayal warning so bright it could be used as a lantern. Guilds hated Riley. Riley hated boredom. We got along because neither of us trusted the other at all. Riley told me Vera was planning to buy the next raid gate's entrance order. Mason was planning to ambush me before the gate opened. Brooke was trying to stop him without getting expelled. And a hidden merchant had appeared on the 7th floor selling cursed items nobody wanted. I asked Riley what the catch was. They said the merchant only accepted memories. That sounded terrible. So of course I went. The 7th floor was a carnival under a red moon. Every tent promised power. Every game was rigged. Guilds entered in groups and got separated by smiling masks that asked personal questions. If you lied, the floor stole a skill for an hour. If you told the truth, it stole something worse, like confidence. I bought a ticket from the solo shop at a discount, so deep the carnival clown at the gate looked offended. Inside, the hidden merchant sat behind a curtain of beads. I never learned the merchant's name because I made a rule not to name anything that might eat my future. The shelves held cursed items with ridiculous warnings. A sword that screamed compliments at enemies, boots that doubled speed but only backward, a potion that made you invisible to allies and extremely visible to chickens. A coin that always landed on its edge and caused nearby gamblers to cry. The merchant asked for 1 happy childhood memory per item. I had a problem. I did not have many spare happy childhood memories, and I was not eager to spend the few I had on backward boots. Then I remembered resource denial compensation. I opened the solo shop inside the cursed shop. The 2 shops looked at each other like rival cats. A hidden discount applied. Memory cost reduced due to emotional scarcity. The merchant frowned. Instead of a happy childhood memory, the tower let me pay with a mildly pleasant memory of finding fries at the bottom of a takeout bag. I bought the screaming compliment sword, backward boots, and edge coin. The merchant looked robbed. I felt spiritually richer and emotionally unchanged. Outside, Mason's ambush waited between 2 game tents. He had brought a full squad. Brooke was there too, pale and angry, clearly forced to watch. Mason accused me of manipulating the tower. He said if I could not be recruited, I would be contained. His squad surrounded me with nets designed to count as restraint rather than attack. Smart, annoyingly smart. If they captured me without damaging me, theft penalties might not trigger. Mason was learning. Unfortunately for him, I had just bought weapons designed by a clown nightmare. I put on the backward boots and turned around. Then I ran away from him at full speed while facing him. The squad froze because nobody expects cowardice to charge directly at their eyes. I threw the edge coin into the air. It landed upright between two stones. Every person nearby who had ever gambled stared at it in horror. Half the squad stopped moving. I drew the screaming compliment sword. It pointed at Mason and yelled that his hair had excellent volume. The insult was not the words, it was the sincerity. Mason flinched like he had been stabbed in the soul. I used the moment to slide under a net, snap the bone umbrella open, scoop carnival dust into the air, and kick a tent pole with my backward boots. The tent collapsed. The masks inside woke up and started asking Mason's squad personal questions. One player lied about being over a breakup and lost the ability to use fire magic. Another admitted he was afraid of soup and started crying. Mason tried to cut through the tent fabric, but the sword kept complimenting him, louder and louder, until every nearby monster decided he was the most emotionally important target. I escaped with Brooke because she grabbed my sleeve at the last second. Technically, she grabbed me. Technically, that could have made a party if the tower was feeling dramatic. It did not. Maybe because she was not asking me to carry her. Maybe because I was the one being dragged. Behind a candy stall, she told me Mason had crossed a line. Vera had offered him support if he delivered me trapped but alive. Brooke wanted out of his guild, but leaving before a floor clear triggered debt penalties. I asked how much debt. She told me. It was absurd. The guild had charged her for robes, room space, food, mana potions, and something labeled team spirit maintenance. That was the second lesson of the tower. Sometimes the monsters outside the walls were honest. They bit you because they were hungry. Guilds wrote it down first. I told Brooke not to leave yet. That surprised her. It surprised me too. But if she left alone, Mason would crush her with penalties. If she stayed, I could use her position like a loose thread in a cheap sweater. And I had become very good at pulling threads. The 8th floor was a courtroom. Not a symbolic courtroom, a real one carved from black marble, with judge statues, witness cages, and contracts crawling across the walls like snakes. The tower announced that all disputes over loot, debt, party obligation, and contribution would be settled by trial combat or trial logic. Guild leaders looked thrilled. Strong guilds had lawyers, scribes, witnesses, and fighters. Solo players had whatever they could carry and a strong chance of being shouted into debt. Mason filed a claim against me immediately. He demanded restitution for stolen raid value, interference, unauthorized commerce, emotional damage from public humiliation, and illegal use of cursed compliments. The court accepted the case. I stood alone at the defense podium. Mason stood with a legal team behind him. Vera sat in the upper gallery, expression unreadable. Brooke stood in Mason's witness line, jaw tight. Riley sat in the public seats, eating something they definitely stole. The judge statue asked for my representative. I said I represented myself. The entire courtroom murmured. The judge statue asked if I understood the risk. I said no, but that had not stopped me so far. Mason's side presented a mountain of claims. They said my solo raid rewards relied on damage done by others. They said my merchant counter undermined guild supply stability. They said my presence caused strategic confusion. They showed witnesses who described me dropping bells, stealing treasure, using a sword that complimented people without consent, and wearing a spoon crown in a disrespectful manner. Honestly, they made me sound amazing. Then it was my turn. I placed one item on the podium. A receipt. Then another. Then another. By the time I was done, the podium looked like a paper avalanche. Every item I had claimed had a tower notice. Every raid reward had ownership confirmation. Every sale from my tiny room had buyer consent. Every supply price was lower than guild tax. Every accusation of interference was supported by a situation where guild members had either abandoned loot, attacked each other, blocked public access, or attempted restraint without legal claim. Mason's legal team looked annoyed. Then I called Brooke as my witness. Mason smiled because he thought she was trapped by guild loyalty clauses. Brooke stepped forward. The contract snake around her wrist tightened. She could not lie against her guild without penalty. So I asked questions that did not require betrayal. Did Mason's guild charge healers for mana potions used on guild members? Yes. Did Mason order members to prioritize high-value players when resources were low? Yes. Did Mason attempt to restrain me without filing a prior claim? Yes. Did the guild debt contract include team spirit maintenance? The courtroom paused like even marble judges had limits. Yes. I asked if team spirit maintenance had a defined service. Brooke said no. The contract snake around her wrist loosened. I turned to the judge statue and claimed that Mason's Guild had created fraudulent debt categories, meaning all member debt linked to those categories required review. Then I added that if Mason claimed my solo loot relied on shared labor, he also had to accept shared liability for every monster redirected by guild noise, every trap triggered by guild movement, and every boss rage caused by guild infighting. Trial logic calculation began. The walls filled with numbers. Mason's smile died slowly. The court found my loot claims valid, my commerce legal, my spoon crown disrespectful but not actionable. Mason's debt clauses entered review. Brooke's fraudulent debt vanished instantly, along with the same clause for dozens of lower guild members. Then the judge statue awarded me compensation for attempted illegal containment. Mason owed me one favor token. He looked ready to explode. I accepted the token with both hands because nothing tasted better than legally harvested pride. That should have been a clean victory, but the tower never let anyone breathe for long. The 9th floor opened as soon as the courtroom closed. It was called the Feast of Alliances, and it looked harmless. Long tables, golden plates, warm light, endless food. After weeks of hunger, players cried just smelling bread. Then the rule appeared. All food consumed at a table creates a temporary alliance among diners. Betrayal penalties severe. Alliance objectives revealed after meal. Guilds loved it. They already ate together. They sat in disciplined groups, careful and proud. Solo players panicked. Eat alone and you got no alliance objective. Eat with strangers and you risked being chained to idiots. I had a different problem. My solo bonuses warned me that joining an alliance table would suspend several advantages. No lower attention, no solo loot, no solo achievements until alliance dissolved. The food smelled like heaven with butter. I almost sat down anyway. And I saw Riley at a corner table with 3 plates, 2 stolen forks, and the expression of someone waiting for disaster. Riley had arranged breadcrumbs in a pattern. A message. Do not eat from plates. I trusted Riley exactly enough to distrust the plates. I bought a discounted inspection lens from the solo shop and looked at the food. Each plate had a glowing thread connecting it to a table banner. Eat from the plate, join the alliance. But food that fell off the plate became unclaimed. I smiled. I walked behind tables, bumped elbows, kicked benches, startled a server statue, and caused tiny accidents. Rolls fell, meat slid, apples bounced, players shouted. I apologized constantly and collected fallen food with leftover claim. No plate, no alliance. I ate like a raccoon under a banquet table and kept every solo bonus. Then the alliance objectives appeared. Each table had to defeat another table before the feast ended. The hall exploded. Guilds that had sat proudly together were now trapped in team fights against neighboring tables. Betrayal penalties stopped internal backstabbing, but nothing stopped bad decisions. Mason's table was ordered to defeat Vera's table. Vera's table was ordered to survive without attacking first. Brooke had accidentally sat with a healer group whose objective was to keep everyone alive, including enemies, which made their table useless in the funniest possible way. I was not part of any table. The monsters arrived 5 minutes later. The feast statues unfolded into golden armored beasts that attacked the loudest alliances. Lower enemy attention kept them drifting past me while I crawled under tables, cut banner ropes, and dropped food at strategic spots. Since alliance beasts targeted table banners, moving a banner moved the problem. I tied Mason's banner to a roast pig and rolled it under Vera's table. Mason's entire objective ran after the pig. Vera noticed me for half a second, and that was enough to make my spine cold. She did not panic, she did not shout. She cut her own tablecloth, used it as a decoy banner, and redirected Mason's players into a cluster of beasts. For the first time, someone adjusted to my trick while it was still happening. Vera was dangerous. She later found me near a dessert fountain, where I was filling my cloak pockets with claimed pastries. She said I treated rules like doors. I said most doors were just walls with poor commitment. She offered me a second chance to join her guild. This time, she did not offer protection, she offered partnership. She said the tower was producing a new kind of player through me, and she preferred owning the future before it became expensive. I asked what happened if I refused. She said she would stop offering. That scared me more than a threat. I refused anyway. The 10th floor was the first siege. A monster fortress rose in the center of a dead valley. The tower announced that guilds would compete for control points. Points generated raid keys. Raid keys opened treasure vaults. Solo players received no control points. Guilds cheered. Finally, a floor built for banners, numbers, territory, and discipline. I looked at the notice and waited. There it was, hidden underneath. Territory exclusion compensation active. Unclaimed route privileges unlocked. The map appeared for me alone. It showed tunnels, drainage cracks, forgotten supply paths, and monster patrol moods. Not patrol routes, patrol moods. Apparently ogres got bored after lunch and skeleton archers were insecure near tall grass. I had no control point, so I controlled everything between the points. While guilds fought over flags, I took over roads. I placed bell lines near enemy patrols, glue pits near retreat paths, fake treasure markers near greedy squads, and apology notes on doors that opened into monster barracks. The tower gave me bonus rewards for every solo disruption that changed a battle without joining a side. Mason tried to capture the East Tower. I rerouted bored ogres into his supply wagons by hanging a sign that said free compliments and leaving the screaming sword nearby. The sword praised the ogre's posture. The ogres became emotionally attached and followed it straight into Mason's camp. Vera captured the north gate cleanly, then sent scouts through the drainage tunnels to find me. I had expected that. I bought a cheap smell bomb from the solo shop and labeled it rare stealth potion. Riley stole it from my decoy bag, got chased by scouts, realized the trick, laughed so hard they almost got caught, then sold me the scouts' bootlaces afterward. Brooke moved between camps healing injured low-ranked players from multiple guilds, even when her own people complained. I used my favor token from Mason to force his guild to provide a guarded medical tent under neutral terms. He hated every second, but the court token burned until he obeyed. By the end of the siege, no guild knew who had won. Vera held the most control points. Mason claimed the most kills. Riley claimed 3 treasure vaults and denied being in the valley. Brooke saved more players than any healer on the floor. And I had collected the most raid keys. Because control points generated keys, yes. But unclaimed routes generated lost keys when guild couriers got ambushed. Leftover claim did the rest. I opened a vault alone at dawn. Inside was not a weapon. It was a small black badge shaped like an empty banner. One-man guild seed acquired. The badge did not make me a guild, not yet. It stored achievements that would normally be spread among party roles: tanking, damage, healing, scouting, looting, command. If I performed enough role functions alone, it would evolve. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. The tower had given me a guild badge for having no guild. From then on, I started playing differently. Before, I survived by avoiding direct fights. Now I needed to perform every role myself, which sounded impossible until I remembered most roles were just fancy words for problems. Tank meant do not die when hit. Damage meant make the enemy regret having organs. Healing meant undo stupidity. Scouting meant learn where stupidity waited. Command meant make stupidity happen somewhere useful. Looting meant put the results in my bag. I could do that. The 11th floor was a swamp of sleeping giants. The guild solution was careful movement, silent spells, and long detours. My solution involved buying a discounted jar of giant nose pepper and asking a very important question. If lower enemy attention made monsters ignore me, would they still react to environmental suffering? The answer was yes. I sprinkled nose pepper near a giant's face, hid under the bone umbrella, and waited. The giant sneezed so hard the swamp water formed a wave that crushed 3 monster nests, revealed a hidden bridge, and launched a guild scout into a tree. Solo environmental impact recognized, command function recorded. I repeated this carefully, turning sleeping giants into natural disasters with allergies. Guilds thought the floor was experiencing random swamp weather. Mason blamed Vera. Vera probably knew it was me, but could not prove it. Then the Swamp Queen emerged. She was a massive serpent with moss horns and eyes like green lanterns. Guilds gathered for a serious raid. Even I knew tricks had limits. The serpent's body coiled around the only exit bridge. Her scales reflected projectiles. Her venom melted shields. Her roar woke giants. For once, I considered waiting for the guilds to weaken her. Then I saw Brooke trapped on the wrong side of the bridge, healing a line of injured players while the serpent moved closer. Mason ordered a retreat. Vera held her formation and chose not to risk her elite squad for strangers. Everyone made logical decisions. I hated logical decisions. I ran onto the bridge alone. Serpent barely noticed me at first. Lower attention bought me 10 seconds. I used them to tie my rope around a broken pillar, hook the screaming sword to the rope, and throw the sword into the serpent's horn. It began complimenting her scales. The serpent froze. Apparently giant swamp serpents were vain. I ran under her jaw, opened my bone umbrella, and launched the edge coin into her mouth. The coin landed upright on her tongue. The serpent's eyes crossed. For reasons I still did not understand, every creature with greed in its soul hated that coin. The serpent tried to spit it out. It stuck. She thrashed. Giants woke. The guilds screamed. I sprinted backward with the backward boots, facing the serpent while moving away, baiting her into striking the bridge pillars. Each strike cracked stone. Each crack shifted the bridge. Brooke realized what I was doing before anyone else. She moved the injured players off the weak sections. The final pillar broke. The bridge dropped like a trapdoor. The serpent fell into the swamp trench below, where 3 sneezing giants rolled over in confusion and pinned her under mud. Solo boss displacement achieved. Tank function recorded. Damage function recorded. Command function recorded. Emergency rescue contribution recorded. I collapsed on the safe side of the bridge, covered in swamp water and victory. Brooke knelt beside me and tried to heal me. I told her not to accidentally join my party. She said I was too annoying to party with. That healed me emotionally more than the spell. After the swamp, my reputation changed again. People stopped calling me weak. That should have felt good. It did not. Weak was an insult I understood. The new words were worse. Unfair. Exploit. Rule parasite. Cheater. The tower had not come after me. It did not need to. People did. Guilds were built on the belief that nobody could rise alone. My existence made their contracts look less like safety and more like cages with banners. Vera adapted first. She announced a public policy on the 12th floor. Unaffiliated players could operate only under guild sponsorship within shared zones. Any unsponsored solo player entering guild-cleared territory would be treated as a hazard, not attacked directly, not robbed, just denied bridges, shops, campfires, information, and access to rescue. It was elegant, cruel, but elegant. Mason supported it loudly because he liked any plan that sounded like revenge wearing paperwork. The 12th floor was a frozen library where books attacked readers with spoilers of their own deaths. Guilds controlled the warm reading rooms. Vera's policy meant I could not enter without agreeing to sponsorship. So I went through the return slot. The library had book chutes that carried damaged books to repair shelves. I covered myself in torn pages, tied a label to my cloak that said emotionally damaged volume, and let the conveyor drag me through the wall. Inside, the books whispered possible deaths. Logan slips on ice and cracks his skull. Logan opens the wrong door and is eaten by punctuation. Logan trusts Riley and regrets it. That one seemed plausible. I ignored the whispers and searched for the hidden objective. The guilds assumed the floor was about collecting spellbooks. Vera's guild copied indexes. Mason's guild burned books that insulted him. Brooke worked in the medical corner, treating paper cuts that were somehow serious. The real treasure was overdue notices. Every guild that borrowed a book from the library accepted a tiny rule: return knowledge or pay interest. They thought the interest was coin. It was not. It was memory, focus, and eventually skills. The longer they held books, the weaker they became. I did not borrow anything. I claimed abandoned overdue slips from floors and desks, then used leftover claim to gather the debts nobody wanted. That sounded bad until the solo shop offered a debt shredder for 2 coins and a self-esteem bruise. I shredded the slips. Knowledge conservation bonus applied. Solo librarian achievement unlocked. The one-man guild badge absorbed scouting and support functions. Then I found Vera waiting at the restricted shelf. She had figured out the debt rule, of course. She held a book bound in frost, her fingers steady despite the cold. She said if I shredded the central contract, the floor would collapse into open access. Every guild's borrowed knowledge would become public. Her advantage would vanish, but so would Mason's. She asked what I wanted in exchange. I said nothing. That bothered her. She said everyone wanted something. I told her I wanted people to stop putting toll gates in front of doors they did not build. Vera studied me like I was a puzzle missing the cruelest piece. Then Mason arrived with a squad and accused us both of conspiracy. He grabbed the frost book from Vera because Mason's survival instinct had taken the day off. The library screamed. Every spoiler book opened at once. Death predictions flew through the air like angry birds. Mason saw one about himself and panicked. His squad scattered. Vera moved to save the central contract, not because she liked Mason, but because she hated uncontrolled outcomes. I moved faster. I threw the edge coin into the contract gears. The gears tried to decide whether the coin was heads or tails. They jammed. Then I opened the bone umbrella, used it as a shield against flying spoilers, and shoved the debt shredder into the central contract. The frozen library exploded into warm light. All borrowed knowledge became public for 1 hour. Every low-rank player on the floor suddenly understood the maps, traps, monster habits, and debt clauses that guild leaders had been hiding. Chaos followed, but it was useful chaos. Players returned books. Contracts burned, hidden shelves opened. Vera lost control of the room for the first time since I had seen her. She did not look angry. She looked alive. That was much scarier. At the end of the floor, the one-man guild badge evolved. It gained a tiny blank banner that fluttered without wind. Role balance reached, provisional solo guild authority unlocked. I could now issue one command per floor to nobody in particular. The tower described it as a morale effect for self-directed combat units. I described it as yelling at myself with benefits. The first command I tried was simple. Do not die stupidly. My stamina recovered by 3%. Excellent leadership. The 13th floor was where Mason finally broke. It was a desert of glass, and at the center stood a sun furnace that had to be cooled by carrying water crystals through monster territory. Guilds made chains. Carriers ran from oasis to furnace while guards fought glass scorpions. It was brutal but straightforward. I could have used lower attention to sneak crystals through. Instead, Mason used his remaining influence to spread a bounty. Any player who slowed me down would earn guild credit. They could not rob my secured loot, but they could block paths, shout near monsters, or accidentally collapse bridges. Dozens of desperate players joined the harassment. I ran through the glass desert with half the floor trying to make me fail without technically attacking. It was almost impressive. A player dropped stones in my path. Another rang bells behind me. Someone painted arrows on dunes leading into scorpion nests. I admired the creativity while hating the inconvenience. Then I remembered I had become a merchant of unfair situations. I stopped running. I opened my portable room in the side of a glass dune, set up my counter, and started selling anti-bounty services. For 1 coin, I would reveal which guild had underpaid them. For 2 coins, I would show how to dodge scorpion tail strikes. For 3 coins, I would sign a receipt confirming they had attempted to slow me down, so they could claim Mason's bounty without actually doing anything. By sunset, half the bounty hunters had bought proof of effort from me and gone home. The other half got angry. So I offered a premium bundle. For 5 coins, I would let them chase me toward Mason's caravan. They accepted. Mason saw me running over a dune with 20 bounty hunters behind me and smiled. Then he saw the glass scorpions chasing the bounty hunters, the rolling water crystals chasing the scorpions, and Riley riding one of the crystals like a circus performer. The entire mess crashed into Mason's supply line. I slipped through the chaos, delivered 3 water crystals to the furnace, and claimed a solo logistics achievement. Mason attacked me himself after that. Not restrained, not legal pressure, not clever traps. He snapped and swung his sword at my head. The tower warning flashed. Unauthorized attack against solo protected participant. Mason did not stop. His sword hit my open bone umbrella and cracked it down the center. The impact sent me rolling across glass. Pain burst through my arm. For a second, the whole floor blurred. Mason raised his sword again. I had no time for traps, no room for jokes, no strength to block. So I used his favor token. The one he still owed me. I activated it and gave the order. Drop your sword. The court token burned white. Mason's hand opened against his will. His sword fell. I kicked the edge coin under his boot. He stepped on it, slipped because it refused to choose a side, and landed face first in the glass sand. Then I snapped the broken bone umbrella shut around his ankle and dragged him 3 feet, just enough for the tower to recognize restraint reversal. Self-defense confirmed, solo duel survived, tank function advanced. I did not finish him. That would have been simple, and simple was not satisfying enough. I left him there while the same bounty hunters he had hired arrived, with receipts proving they had done their job badly. By nightfall, Mason's guild had started abandoning him. Brooke left officially the next morning. Her debts had been shredded, reviewed, and burned. She did not join me. I did not ask. She set up a neutral healing stall near my portable room, charging fair prices and refusing guild priority. People came. At first, they came secretly. Low-rank fighters, scouts, cooks, shield carriers, injured couriers. They paid Brooke for healing and me for supplies. Riley sold rumors from a nearby crate and pretended not to be part of anything. We were not a guild. We were a problem with foot traffic. The 14th floor tried to punish foot traffic. It was a vertical city inside a hollow tower shaft, full of elevators powered by monster cores. Guilds controlled the elevators. Without them, climbing meant using broken stairs wrapped around the outside of the shaft, where wind spirits knocked people into open air. Vera made her move there. She did not block me, she did not threaten me. She invited everyone to a public ascent contract. Any player could ride guild elevators for a fair fee, accept emergency healing, and receive standard loot shares. It was better than most guild deals, clean, efficient, reasonable. And it made my little counter look unnecessary. That was Vera's real attack, not force, competence. People drifted back toward banners, not because they hated me, because safety with a smile was hard to resist. For 1 hour, I felt like the tower had returned me to the recruitment square, alone again, weak again, outmarketed by someone stronger, richer, and better dressed. Then Riley dropped onto my roof and asked if I planned to sulk or commit architecture. I asked what architecture had done to deserve me. Riley pointed at the broken outside stairs. The guilds controlled elevators, they did not control falling. That was the entire plan. I bought every cheap rope, hook, pulley, wind charm, and suspiciously legal liability waiver the solo shop offered. Brooke refused to help at first because the plan sounded like a medical bill with stairs. Then I showed her the waiver, and she refused harder. So I built it anyway. A solo transit route down the outside of the shaft. Not up, down. Guild elevators were valuable because they carried players upward safely, but after clearing upper platforms, guild squads had to send injured players and loot back down. Elevators became crowded, fees doubled. Vera's contract was fair until demand made fairness slow. I offered descent by controlled falling. For a small fee, I strapped people into rope harnesses, opened wind charms at precise intervals, and let them drop 20 floors while screaming. Brooke stood at the bottom to heal bruised pride. Riley stole nothing during rides, allegedly. Players loved it. They called it insane, they also used it constantly. The tower recognized my route as infrastructure. Solo support network established, one-man guild badge expanded. Vera visited at sunset and watched 3 armored fighters drop through the air yelling prayers to people they had ignored before the apocalypse. She actually laughed, once, quietly. Then she told me Mason was climbing the outside stairs with what remained of his loyalists. He planned to break the route supports and blame wind spirits. I thanked her for the information. She said it was not a gift, it was an investment in entertainment. Mason attacked during the busiest hour. He cut 2 anchor ropes, the route lurched. A carrier dropped too fast, spinning toward the shaft wall. Brooke shouted. Riley vanished into the support beams. Vera's scouts watched from elevator platforms. I had expected Mason to sabotage the ropes. So the visible ropes were not the real supports. They were bell ropes. When Mason cut them, bells rang across the shaft in a pattern I had tuned for wind spirits. The invisible creatures gathered instantly, annoyed and curious. I opened the screaming sword and had it complement the wind. The wind spirits became vain faster than the swamp serpent. They swirled around the route, lifting falling players gently because the sword kept praising their grace. Mason, meanwhile, was standing on an exposed stair holding cut ropes and looking very guilty. The tower did the rest. Public infrastructure sabotage detected, penalty applied. The stair under Mason turned into soap. He slid down 3 levels, screaming the whole way, and landed in Brooke's healing tent. Brooke healed his broken ribs because she was better than him. Then she charged full price. After that, Mason stopped being the main threat, not because he became harmless, but because the tower had outgrown him. People who cling to old insults become smaller as the world gets bigger. Vera did not shrink. She expanded. 15th floor was a crown labyrinth, a massive shifting maze where every guild had to nominate a leader. The floor objective was simple. Reach the center, claim the crown beacon, and open the next ascent gate. Only leaders could touch the beacon. Guilds entered with full teams. Leaders gained buffs from nearby members. The larger and more loyal the guild, the stronger the leader became. I entered alone with a provisional one-man guild badge that still had no official name. The labyrinth looked at me and hesitated. Leader detected, member count 1. Loyalty 100%. I laughed because of course I was loyal to myself. I was annoying, but I had history. Leader buff applied at maximum concentration. Power rushed through me so suddenly I almost fell over. My strength doubled, my stamina tripled, my senses sharpened. The badge on my chest burned warm. Every role I had performed alone looped back into me. Tank, scout, damage, command, support, logistics, merchant, librarian, nuisance. The tower did not see one weak player anymore. It saw a guild compressed into a single stubborn idiot. The labyrinth began. Walls shifted every minute. Guilds tried to map it, but maps became outdated before ink dried. Vera's guild moved with frightening discipline, using signal lights and roll rotations. Mason stumbled somewhere behind with a handful of loyalists and a lot of bandages. Brooke stayed near the entrance as neutral support, refusing to nominate any leader. Riley entered through a snack vent and claimed that counted as strategy. My advantage was not speed, it was independence. Guilds moved like caravans, I moved like a rumor. When walls shifted, I slipped through gaps. When monsters spawned, lower attention let me choose fights instead of receiving them like bills. When treasure rooms opened, loot ownership made every solo claim clean. When the maze offered party shortcuts requiring trust falls, I triggered solo alternatives requiring shame, such as crawling through a tunnel labeled for maintenance gremlins only. Halfway through, the labyrinth introduced crown knights. They were armored guardians that challenged leaders directly. The stronger the leader's support, the stronger the knight. Vera's knight was a golden monster with 6 blades. It matched her guild's perfect formation. She fought it like a queen, calm and precise, while her members fed her buffs. My knight appeared as a dented scarecrow, holding a wooden club. At first, I was insulted. Then it moved exactly like me on the first floor. Weak, desperate, clever. The scarecrow threw pepper dust at my eyes. I barely blocked with the broken bone umbrella. It rang bells with its foot. It used wire traps. It tried to claim my dropped dagger with a fake receipt. It was not strong, but it was me before confidence, and that made it dangerous. For once, I could not rely on old tricks. It knew them. So I used something new. I commanded myself. Win differently. One-man guild badge flared. My leader buff shifted. Instead of boosting strength, it boosted improvisation. The maze slowed in my perception. Every object became an option. Loose tile, dust pattern, cracked wall. My own shadow. The scarecrow lunged. I did nothing. War patience reduced the impact. The scarecrow expected me to counterattack with the dagger. Instead, I hugged it. It froze, because my old self did not know what to do with mercy. I whispered that being weak had been useful, but I did not need to stay there. Then I opened the portable room door behind it and shoved it inside. The scarecrow landed in my tiny room, looked at the probably tomorrow poster, and dissolved into straw. Self-origin trial cleared. One-man guild identity stabilized. The badge changed shape. It became a black banner with a silver empty circle in the center. Guild name requested. I thought about calling it something cool. Shadow Crown, Last Banner, Solo Storm, something people would whisper dramatically. Then I remembered the first night, the moldy sign, the freezing barracks, and the fact that I had survived mostly by refusing to be embarrassed. I named it Probably Tomorrow. The tower accepted. Somewhere I was sure Vera felt a headache. Near the center, the labyrinth forced all leader paths together. Vera arrived from the north with half her elite squad still standing. Mason arrived from the west, furious, limping, and carrying a stolen crown shard that was clearly cursed. Riley dropped from the ceiling eating a pastry from a floor we had left behind. I arrived through a laundry chute with dust in my hair. The crown beacon stood on a raised platform. It was a crystal flame inside a ring of thorns. Only one leader could claim it. The floor wanted a final battle. Vera knew it, Mason wanted it. Riley looked ready to bet on it. Even I felt the pull. All the mocking, chasing, taxing, suing, sabotaging, and surviving had led to that platform. Mason moved first. He raised the cursed crown shard and activated a force challenge. The labyrinth locked the exits. His stolen shard fed on his remaining followers, draining their stamina into him. They collapsed behind him, shocked, but still loyal enough for the crown to count them. Mason grew stronger with every stolen breath. That was the ugliest kind of guild power. The kind that called itself leadership while eating the people who believed in it. He charged at me, not Vera. Of course he did. Some people would rather lose everything than let the person they mocked stand above them. His first strike shattered the floor where I had been standing. I rolled aside, tossed the edge coin, and watched him ignore it. He had learned. He kicked my bell line before I triggered it, learned again. He deflected the returning dagger, learned again. Mason was not stupid. He was worse. He was stupid with experience. I retreated around the platform, while Vera fought thorn guardians to keep the beacon from sealing. Riley dragged unconscious followers away from Mason's drain zone while pretending it was not heroic. Brooke was not in the labyrinth, but I could hear her voice in my memory telling me not to die because healing idiots was expensive. Mason cornered me against the thorn ring. My umbrella was cracked. My sword was screaming compliments at the thorns because it had terrible priorities. My boots were tangled. My tricks were spent. Mason said I had no one. For the first time, that insult did not land. I looked past him at Vera holding the Guardians back, Riley cutting drain threads, distant players freed by shredded debts and fair supplies, Brooks' neutral tent at the entrance, the routes, the receipts, the bells. The stupid falling service, the public knowledge, the people who had survived because I did not join a banner. I was solo. I was not alone. There was a difference, and Mason had never understood it. I activated my guild command. Probably tomorrow, hold. The badge flared. The command targeted every object I owned, not people, not allies, my loot, my claimed items, my infrastructure, my receipts, my bells, my ropes, my portable room door, my spoon crown, my rabbit cloak. My broken umbrella. Loot ownership secured. All of it answered. The spoon crown flew from my bag and clamped onto Mason's cursed shard. The shard tried to drain loyalty from it, found only goblin bureaucracy, and stalled. The screaming sword praised Mason's commitment to terrible choices. The edge coin rolled under the thorn ring and balanced perfectly, jamming the beacon's defense rotation. My portable room door opened on the wall behind Mason. Every receipt I had saved burst out like a paper storm. Mason swung through the papers, but each one was a legal confirmation. Loot secured, debt voided, claim valid, sabotage penalized, favor fulfilled, self-defense recognized, infrastructure established. The labyrinth read them all. Mason's cursed shard counted his stolen power as contested party resources. The penalty struck instantly. All the strength he had drained snapped back to his followers. Mason staggered, suddenly just a tired man with a sword too heavy for his own hands. I stepped forward. I did not punch him, I did not stab him, I did something worse. I handed him a bill. It was for unpaid damages to one bone umbrella, emotional distress caused to a compliment sword, public route sabotage, attempted illegal containment, and one spoon crown polishing fee. The Labyrinth Court subroutine accepted it. Mason fainted. Riley laughed so hard they fell over. Vera stared at me across the thorn ring, and for one breath I thought she would challenge me next. She still had strength, she still had followers, she still wanted the future before it became expensive. Instead, she lowered her weapon. She said claiming the beacon after that would make her look boring. Coming from Vera, that was practically applause. I climbed the platform. The crown beacon burned brighter as I approached. The tower asked for guild confirmation. Probably tomorrow, member count 1. Then after a pause, the number flickered. Associated Support Network recognized. Not party, not guild members, not followers. Network. Brooks' healing tent, Riley's rumor trade, the descent route, the public library release, the freed low-rank players, the people who had bought fair supplies and lived one more floor. None of them belonged to me. That was why it worked. The crown beacon accepted my hand. The labyrinth opened. A wave of silver fire shot up the tower shaft, clearing the gate to the next descent. Every player on the floor saw the message. Crown Labyrinth cleared by Logan, leader of Probably Tomorrow. Solo Guild Authority recognized. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the cheering started. Not from everyone. Some guild elites looked furious. Some leaders looked terrified. Mason was unconscious and therefore gave his best speech yet. Vera's expression remained calm, but her eyes were sharp with plans. Riley bowed like they had won. Brooks' healing tent at the entrance overflowed with injured players celebrating and complaining at the same time. I should have felt invincible. Instead, I felt tired, hungry, and very aware that my umbrella was broken. But when I walked out of the labyrinth, the same people who once laughed at my cracked club stepped aside. Not because a guild ordered them. Because the tower had put my name above theirs. The recruitment square had been replaced by a new plaza beyond the Crown Gate. It had bigger shops, darker doors, and a sky bridge stretching into a storm of floating islands. Guild banners gathered behind me. Some wanted alliance, some wanted revenge, some wanted to pretend they had supported me the whole time. The solo shop appeared one more time before the gate. New authority tier unlocked. One-man guild privileges expanded. Warning, future floors may recognize independent leadership as a strategic threat from other participants. Not from the tower. From people. That was fine. People I could understand. The shop offered repairs for my umbrella, upgrades for the returning dagger, and a new item wrapped in black cloth. It cost almost everything I had earned. Even with my discount, it was ridiculous. I touched it and the description appeared. Blank banner stake allows a solo guild leader to claim one temporary territory without recruiting members. Territory effects depend on how the leader defines belonging. I looked back. Brooke was arguing with 3 patients who all claimed they were dying first. Riley was selling fake Mason fainting sketches with surprisingly accurate detail. Vera was already reorganizing her people for the Sky Bridge. Mason had woken up and was reading my bill with the face of a man experiencing personal weather. Then I looked forward. The storm above the floating islands flashed purple. Something huge moved inside the clouds, not a tutorial monster, not a joke, not a balance rule waiting to save me. A real challenge. I bought the blank banner stake. The shop took my coins, several trophies, 2 embarrassing memories, and the Spoon Crown's legal certification. The crown drooped in my bag like it had been disbarred. I stepped onto the Sky Bridge. Vera called after me that independent territory would make every guild leader nervous. I told her nervous leaders made honest mistakes. Riley asked if I had a plan. I said no. That was a lie. I had 7 plans, 3 backup disasters, and a bell tied to a cloud just in case clouds had opinions. Brooke told me to come back alive because she was not healing my ghost. I raised the broken umbrella, now patched with silver thread, and walked into the storm as the tower announced the next floor's rule. Territory war begins at sundown. All guilds may claim land. Unclaimed leaders may be challenged. I smiled so wide my face hurt. Everyone had joined guilds to survive. I had stayed solo because nobody wanted me. Now the tower recognized my banner, the guilds knew my name, and the storm ahead was full of land nobody owned yet. Which meant, for the first time since the apocalypse began, the biggest advantage on the board was not strength, money, numbers, or fame. It was being underestimated by people who should have learned better. And if they wanted a territory war, I was going to give them the most annoying kingdom the tower had ever seen. The Sky Bridge shook the moment my foot touched it. Not politely, not like a warning tremor. It shook like the tower had grabbed the bridge by both ends and decided to test if humans made funny noises when bounced. I grabbed the railing with one hand and the blank banner stake with the other. The bridge was made of white stone plates floating in a line through the storm. Each plate was separated by a gap just wide enough to make my legs remember I had never been athletic. Purple lightning crawled through the clouds under my feet. The air tasted like wet metal and bad decisions. Behind me, guilds began marching onto the bridge in formation. Of course they did. Nobody had patience in an apocalypse tower. The words territory war had appeared, and every guild leader immediately smelled real estate. They came with banners, shields, carts, tents, cooks, healers, scribes, and enough confidence to choke a dragon. I came with one patched umbrella, one returning dagger, one blank banner stake, and the reputation of a man who kept surviving situations where he had no business standing upright. The first floating island appeared through the clouds ahead. It was a jagged chunk of land with crystal trees, black grass, and a ruined watchtower leaning at an angle that made my back hurt from looking at it. Several smaller islands surrounded it like broken teeth. Far above, something enormous rolled inside the storm clouds, but the guilds ignored that because the tower had placed glowing resource markers everywhere. Food Spring, Ironroot Grove, Healing Moss Bed, Safe Camp Foundation, Mana Crystal Vein. That was all it took. The bridge exploded into greed. Guilds sprinted past me so fast my coat flapped. Players shoved each other, captains shouted claims, banners shot into the ground, and light pillars erupted across the island as territories were marked. The first guild to claim the food spring cheered until a second guild challenged them and started throwing fireballs before anyone had even tasted the water. The Safe Camp Foundation became unsafe in 3 seconds. Mana Crystal Vein had 4 banners planted in it at once, so the tower politely struck all 4 banners with lightning and called it a dispute. I watched from the bridge with my umbrella open. Riley jogged up beside me, breathing hard, clutching a sack of junk like it was treasure. He asked why I was not running. I told him I was running, very slowly, in my mind. He looked at the island, where Mason had already charged into a fight over the Ironroot Grove and was somehow yelling at 3 different people while being hit by all of them. Then Riley looked at my blank banner stake. He asked what land I was going to claim. I pointed at the chaos. He said the good spots were disappearing. I said exactly. That was the thing about guilds. They saw glowing labels and obeyed them. A resource marker might as well have been a fishing hook with soup on it. They rushed to claim whatever the tower made obvious, because obvious things looked valuable. But I had survived this long because I trusted the tiny silver text hiding behind mold, the weird item descriptions, and the parts of the rules that sounded useless until someone clever turned them into a crime scene. The blank banner stake said territory effects depended on how the leader defined belonging. It did not say the territory had to be large. It did not say the territory had to contain a resource marker. It did not say the territory had to be popular, beautiful, or even dry. So while everyone fought over springs and crystals, I stepped off the main road onto a little stone shelf under the bridge. It was barely wider than a wagon, slick with rain, and covered in weeds that looked depressed. No guild had bothered with it because no label floated above it, no monsters guarded it, no treasure glowed. It was just a useless patch of land between the bridge and the first island. Perfect. I planted the blank banner stake in the mud. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the tower asked me to define belonging. I stared at the message. A normal leader would say members, a guild would say sworn allies, Vera would say participants under formal contract. Mason would say anyone who admitted he was handsome, which would leave him alone with a mirror. I thought about my solo bonuses. I thought about how the tower gave advantages based on isolation risk. I thought about every guild that rejected me because I did not belong anywhere. Then I smiled. I defined my territory as belonging to anyone currently belonging nowhere. The mud shelf glowed. Not a glorious gold, not a noble blue. It glowed the faint gray color of forgotten socks, and somehow that made it more powerful. The tower announced that unnamed neutral territory had been claimed. Guild players glanced over, saw me standing on a wet shelf under a bridge, and immediately started laughing. A spear user shouted that I had claimed a puddle. Someone else said I was king of mud. Mason looked over from the ironroot grove with a swollen cheek and yelled that it suited me. I bowed like a royal idiot. Then the territory effect activated. Unaffiliated refuge established. Players without active guild contracts may enter without challenge. Hostile guild members suffer misdirection within the boundary. Solo commerce discount increased. Abandoned items within boundary become unclaimed after 10 seconds. Territory expands along unclaimed paths. My smile froze. Riley leaned over the edge of the bridge and asked what happened. I told him the puddle had opinions. The first effect kicked in immediately. A group of frightened solo players who had been shoved off the main road by a charging guild squad stumbled onto my mud shelf. The moment they entered, their wounds stopped bleeding. Not healed exactly, but paused, like the tower had hit a waiting button on their suffering. Their eyes widened. A few tried to thank me. I told them not to, because gratitude sounded dangerously close to paperwork. Then a guild scout tried to chase them in. He stepped onto the mud shelf, raised his sword, and instantly turned left into a hanging vine. He apologized to the vine, swung at it, missed, and walked in a circle until he fell back onto the bridge. The solo players stared. Riley stared. I stared harder because I had not expected my useless shelf to become a drunk maze. Hostile guild members suffered misdirection. Not damage, not defense, misdirection. That was better. Damage made enemies angry. Misdirection made them stupid. I looked at the bridge, at the unclaimed footpaths between territories, and at the way my gray glow had begun leaking like spilled soup along the cracks between owned land. It did not take territory from anyone. It filled the spaces nobody cared about, the paths, the alleys, the gutters, the gaps between banners. The guilds own the prizes. I own the in-between. And in a territory war, everyone had to move through the in-between. I almost felt bad. Almost. The first guild supply cart rolled across the bridge 5 minutes later. It belonged to one of the larger groups, and it was packed with tents, dried meat, potion crates, and a shiny metal chest that probably contained something expensive enough to make rich people nervous. The cart driver tried to take the shortest route to the food spring. Unfortunately, the shortest route now passed through my territory. The cart crossed the gray line. A message appeared only for me. Hostile logistics entering unaffiliated refuge. Misdirection applies. The cart turned slowly, calmly, and with great confidence rolled down the wrong path past the food spring, past 3 confused healers, and directly onto my mud shelf. The driver blinked, the horses blinked, the cart stopped beside me. Nobody moved for 10 seconds. Abandoned items within boundary become unclaimed. The cart driver realized something was wrong on second 11. I had already touched the potion crate on second 10. Loot ownership confirmed. Riley made a sound like a tea kettle being robbed. The driver shouted that I stole guild property. The tower corrected him. Property unclaimed before acquisition. He shouted louder. The horses looked embarrassed for him. I picked up the shiny metal chest and found that it was too heavy to lift. So I opened it in place, discovered it contained claim nails, emergency barriers, and a folded war banner, then bought an entire wheelbarrow from the solo shop for 2 coins because my discount had reached the level of financial bullying. The driver charged me. He got misdirected, stepped on a loose board, spun around, and accidentally ran back to his own guild screaming that the Mud King had eaten the supplies. That was when the laughter stopped. You can be mocked for being weak, you can be mocked for being alone, you can even be mocked for claiming a puddle, but the moment your puddle starts repossessing supply carts, everyone suddenly wants a meeting. By sundown, the first island was a disaster. Every guild had claimed something, challenged something, lost something, or accused someone else of cheating. The tower did not care. It only cared whether a rule had been broken, and I was beginning to understand the tower's sense of humor. It did not punish clever cruelty, it punished bad paperwork. Vera came to my mud shelf just before the first official territory clash began. Her banner still stood over the healing moss bed, and her people had arranged their camp with clean lines and quiet discipline. She looked at my shelf, at the solo players resting under a stolen tarp, at Riley selling maps of my territory that changed every time he drew them, and at me sitting on a stolen potion crate eating dried fruit I had legally acquired through the ancient right of waiting 10 seconds. She asked if I understood what I had built. I said a mud shelf with snacks. She said I had built a neutral corridor network that could control movement between major territories. I nodded like that had been my plan from the start. It had not been my first plan, it had been Plan 4. Plan 1 involved hiding under the bridge until rich people dropped things. Plan 2 involved pretending to be a statue. Plan 3 involved making Riley yell ghost noises at supply carts, but Plan 4 had dignity, so I wore it on my face. Vera warned me that guilds would try to crush the refuge before it grew. I asked if she was one of them. She looked at the solo players behind me. Most of them were weak, injured, rejected, or too scared to sign contracts after watching guilds use new recruits as arrow umbrellas. Vera was practical, not heartless. That made her dangerous in a way Mason could never understand. She said she would not attack first. I told her that was kind of her. She said kindness had nothing to do with it. Attacking me inside my territory was obviously stupid. I told her that was also kind of her. Then Mason arrived. Not calmly, not strategically. Mason arrived carrying a cracked shield, wearing 3 different guild scarves like trophies, and looking like he had personally argued with a brick wall and lost on points. Behind him marched a squad from his guild, all bigger than me, all angry, all convinced that size counted as a plan. Mason pointed at my banner and announced that he was challenging my territory. The sky dimmed. The tower recognized the challenge. Everyone nearby went silent. I slowly stood up from the potion crate. Mason smiled. He thought he had finally caught me. Territory challenges had rules. A guild could challenge a territory if the leader stood within it. The defender had to accept or surrender ownership. If the defender lost, the banner fell. I checked the challenge window. Dual format selected by challenger. Objective: force leader outside territory boundary or destroy banner stake. Time limit: 10 minutes. Mason had picked the simplest possible format because he believed the simplest format favored him. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was choosing a duel inside a territory where hostile guild members got lost walking in a straight line. His third mistake was smiling before checking where the boundary actually was. My gray territory had expanded while he was talking. It now covered the mud shelf, the underside of the bridge, 2 crooked paths, half a broken stairway, and a thin strip behind his squad's left foot. The countdown began. Mason charged. I did not move. He crossed the gray line, swung his sword, and the misdirection effect bent his path 3 inches to the right. 3 inches did not sound like much, until his sword missed my neck and cut the rope holding a stolen tarp. The tarp fell over his head. He roared, tore it off, and charged again. I stepped back exactly 1 pace. He lunged. Enemy attention reduced outside direct attacks had always been one of my weirdest bonuses. Monsters looked past me unless I hit them. Players did not ignore me the same way, but in my territory, where every rule stacked with every other rule, Mason's focus kept sliding at the worst possible moment. His eyes found my shoulder, then my umbrella, then Riley's ridiculous map stand, then the empty potion crate behind me. I threw my returning dagger. Not at Mason. At the banner stake. My own banner stake. The dagger struck the stake with a sharp clang and bounced back to my hand. Mason laughed and said I missed. I told him I was calibrating. He did not know what that meant, neither did I, but it made him hesitate, and hesitation was just a free coupon for clever people. He attacked again. I opened the broken umbrella. The silver thread caught the wind under the bridge and pulled me sideways like a terrible kite. Mason adjusted, slipped on the mud, and planted 1 boot outside the boundary. Nothing happened because the objective was to force the leader outside, not the challenger. But the tower did announce that Mason had briefly exited hostile territory and re-entered. Entry tax applied. Mason froze. A coin vanished from his pouch and appeared in my hand. Riley fell over laughing. Mason's face turned red enough to cook soup. Then he made his fourth mistake. He ordered his squad to destroy the banner. Dual challenge allowed the challenger's party to attack the banner if the challenger had declared party support before the countdown. Mason had not read that part, but his guild captain must have, because 3 players rushed the stake at once. Hostile guild members suffered misdirection. The first player ran past the stake and tackled a crate. The second tripped over the first. The third actually reached the stake and raised an axe. I threw the returning dagger again. Not at him. At the mud in front of him. The dagger sank into the wet ground. He stepped on the handle, his foot rolled, and his axe came down on the wrong target. Mason's shield. Mason screamed at him. The player apologized. The tower announced friendly damage penalty waived due to non-party defender status. That was a beautiful sentence. I wanted to frame it. Guild players were used to penalties for betrayal, friendly fire, loot theft, and all the little crimes people committed during panic. I had no party. No party meant no betrayal penalty, no shared inventory. No friendly fire penalty when enemies ruined each other in my personal swamp of inconvenience. I danced around them for 7 minutes. Not gracefully, I want to be honest. A lot of my dancing involved slipping, screaming, hiding behind stolen furniture, and once crawling under Mason's legs while he swung over my head, but every ugly move had a purpose. I led him into toll lines. I made his squad re-enter the boundary again and again until their coin pouches sounded emptier. I opened my shop mid-duel and bought a sack of marbles for 1 coin. I scattered them in a path shaped like an arrow pointing toward my banner. They followed the arrow. The marbles followed gravity. The guild players followed the marbles into a pile. With 30 seconds left, Mason got desperate. He ignored the misdirection, lowered his shoulder, and charged straight at me with enough force to break a gate. His eyes locked on mine. For once, his focus did not slide. No trick in the territory could fully stop someone who had decided to become a boulder with feelings. So I let him hit me. His shoulders slammed into my chest. Pain flashed white. My feet left the ground. The crowd gasped as I flew backward toward the edge of the mud shelf. Mason smiled. Then my umbrella caught the bridge rail. The hooked handle snagged the stone. My body swung out over the storm, but my feet never crossed the gray boundary because I had spent the entire duel quietly dragging the boundary line with claim nails from the stolen chest. A thin strip of my territory extended along the railing like a legal string. I hung over the void, wheezing, one hand gripping the umbrella, both feet technically inside my land. The timer hit 0. Challenge failed. Defender retains territory. Failed challenger pays stability compensation. Mason's belt pouch burst open. Coins shot through the air and rained onto my mud shelf like tiny metallic apologies. I dropped back onto the ground, collapsed on my back, and raised one hand. The solo players cheered. Riley started chanting Mud King until I threw a wet sock at him. Mason staggered away in silence. That was new. He usually filled every defeat with words, excuses, and threats. This time, he just looked at the gray glow under his boots like it had betrayed the laws of nature. Brooke arrived after the duel with a healing kit and the expression of someone who wanted to scold me but could not decide where to start. She knelt beside me and said I had 2 cracked ribs. I asked if they were expensive. She told me to shut up and drink the potion. I drank it. It tasted like someone boiled grass in regret. My ribs pulled themselves back together with a wet feeling I never wanted to experience again. Brooke looked around the refuge. The injured solo players had formed lines without being told. Some had started reinforcing the shelf with stolen planks. Others were sorting abandoned supplies. Nobody wore a guild badge, but everyone moved like they finally had a place they were allowed to stand. She asked if I was recruiting. I said no. She asked what I called all this. I looked at the mud, the carts, the crooked paths, the people, and Riley trying to sell commemorative mud in bottles. I said it was a place where rejected people could catch their breath before deciding what came next. Brooke's face softened. Then the storm above us screamed. Every banner on the island bent toward the sky. The giant shape inside the clouds finally descended. At first, I thought it was a dragon because my brain was simple and scared. Then it came lower, and I realized it was worse. It was a floating fortress made of black feathers, bone ribs, and storm clouds, with a monster's eye burning in the center like a purple moon. Chains hung beneath it, each chain ending in a hook big enough to lift a house. The tower announced its name without drama, which somehow made it more terrifying. Storm Tyrant has entered the war field. Neutral territories will be consumed first. I looked at my mud shelf. Of course. The tower was not coming after me personally. It was just the warfield rule. Neutral land was easy prey because it had weak defenses and no giant guild barrier. I had accidentally built the first snack on the monster's menu. The guild saw the announcement and immediately made the same calculation. If the Storm Tyrant ate my territory, the corridor network would disappear. Their supply paths would clear. Their embarrassment would be erased by weather with teeth. Nobody came to help. Some guild players even cheered. Mason watched from the Ironroot Grove, bruised and furious, and for a second I thought he might laugh. He did not. He looked at Brooke standing on my side of the boundary, then he looked away. Vera sent a messenger without a name because I refused to learn the names of people who might become paperwork. The message was simple. She would defend her own territory, but could not move openly without triggering 3 challenges against her camp. Translation: she was trapped by politics. Politics were just chains people wore because they were afraid of standing alone. I knew a little about standing alone. The Storm Tyrant lowered its hooks. I had 5 minutes before the first chain reached my banner. Riley asked if we should evacuate. I looked at the solo players. Some were already trying to stand despite injuries. They had no guilds, no barriers, no healers except Brooke, and no reason to trust that I could stop a flying fortress made of bad weather. I told them they could leave. Nobody moved. That was inconvenient because now I had feelings. I hated feelings during strategy. Feelings made people heroic, and heroic people had a terrible survival rate. So I turned the feelings into math. Storm Tyrant would consume neutral territories first. It targeted territory cores. My core was the blank banner stake. My territory expanded along unclaimed paths. Hostile guild members got misdirected. Banned items became mine after 10 seconds. Solo shop discount had increased. Extra loot ownership applied to anything I personally secured. I opened the shop. The solo shop flickered like it was nervous. New emergency items appeared, all discounted so low it felt illegal. Weighted kite anchors. Decoy banner cloths. Instant ditch voucher. One-use weather apology flute. I bought everything except the flute because I refused to apologize to clouds on principle. Then I bought the flute too because principles were cheaper than dying. With 4 minutes left, I gave orders. That felt strange. I was not a guild leader. I did not want to be one. Orders sounded like responsibility wearing boots. But I was the only person whose territory rule understood the mess we were standing in, so I pointed at people and kept the instructions simple. Move the stolen carts under the bridge. Tie the kite anchors to the chains when they drop. Spread decoy banner cloth across every muddy puddle. If anything glows purple, do not touch it unless Riley says it looks valuable, then touch it with a stick. Brooke organized the injured. Vera's camp could not help openly, but crates started falling from her side of the bridge in a way that looked like accidents. Bandages, rope, and shield plates slid into unclaimed paths. 10 seconds later, they became mine. I saluted her from across the field. She did not smile, but one of her eyebrows admitted guilt. Mason's guild did nothing. At 2 minutes, the first chain crashed down. It struck the mud shelf so hard the ground split. A hook dragged across the territory, searching for my banner stake. The Storm Tyrant's eye focused on us. Fear rolled over the refuge. People froze. I blew the weather apology flute. A sad little note came out. The storm paused. For one beautiful second, the giant eye blinked in confusion. Weather apology accepted. Aggro reduced for 3 seconds. I threw the flute into the storm and shouted that I was not sorry anymore. The eye narrowed. Worth it. The 3 seconds were enough. Solo players swarmed the chain with kite anchors. They tied ropes around the links, attached weighted hooks, and jumped back as the chain lifted again. The weight swung under the Storm Tyrant, pulling one side of the fortress lower, not enough to bring it down, enough to annoy it. Annoyance was my favorite battlefield. The Tyrant released more chains. One hooked a decoy banner cloth and yanked it into the sky. The tower announced that a false core had been consumed. The Storm Tyrant shuddered like it had bitten soap. I laughed so hard my ribs threatened to become a side quest. The monster did not like laughing. Another hook slammed toward the real banner. I used the instant ditch voucher. Perfect trench appeared in front of the stake. The hook fell into it, got stuck, and dragged a line through the mud, widening the trench into a moat. The territory recognized the moat as an unclaimed path. My gray glow spread through it. Territory expansion confirmed. The refuge grew under the storm tyrant's chain. That was when I saw the real opportunity. Chains counted as part of the monster while attached, but the weights and ropes tied to them counted as abandoned items if the monster dragged them across my boundary and ignored them for 10 seconds. Once the tower confirmed ownership, they were mine. If they were mine, then anything they were tied to could be affected by my territory tools, including the chains. I started buying claim nails. Not many, I was not rich anymore, because the shop had eaten my savings like it had rent due, but the territory challenge compensation from Mason had refilled my pouch just enough. I hammered claim nails into the ropes attached to the chains. One by one, the tower asked if I intended to extend temporary boundary along connected unclaimed equipment. I said yes. The gray glow climbed the ropes. Then it climbed the chains. The storm tyrant's eye widened. Riley screamed that I was claiming the monster's jewelry. I told him to stop making it sound cooler than it was. It was exactly that cool. The guilds noticed too late. Across the island, leaders realized my weak little territory was crawling up the tyrant's own chains toward its fortress body. If the gray glow reached the core, maybe I could claim part of the monster. Maybe I could misdirect it. Maybe I could steal loot before anyone else touched it. Suddenly, everyone wanted to help. Not because they liked me, because if I won alone, the solo achievement would be disgusting. Guild squads moved toward the refuge, shouting offers of temporary alliance. Their banners flared. The tower displayed contract windows in my face. I closed them all. No party, no split loot, no betrayal penalties, no shared command, no thank you. Fire Guild launched spells at the storm tyrant from outside my boundary. The spells hit the feather walls and exploded. That was useful until their captain shouted that all contributing guilds deserved loot rights. The tower disagreed. Contribution outside recognized party does not override solo territory core engagement. The captain looked like he had swallowed a bee. I waved. Then Mason did something stupid, brave, and almost helpful. He charged into my territory, carrying the giant war banner from his guild camp. I thought he was attacking again. Brooke shouted his name. Vera's eyes sharpened from across the field. Riley grabbed a frying pan, which was not a weapon but had ambition. Mason planted the war banner at the edge of my mud shelf and yelled that he was not joining me. He was just putting his property somewhere the storm could not eat it. The banner touched my boundary. 10 seconds passed. Abandoned hostile item converted to unclaimed. Mason realized what he had done 1 second too late. I touched the banner. Loot ownership confirmed. His mouth fell open. I expected him to explode. Instead, he pointed at the storm tyrant and said to use it before he changed his mind. For once, there was no insult behind it. I nodded. The stolen war banner was huge, reinforced with iron thread and loaded with guild barrier energy. I could not activate it as a guild banner because I had no guild. But the blank banner stake cared about belonging, not membership. It recognized the war banner as territory material. I wrapped the war banner around my tiny gray stake. The refuge pulsed. Unaffiliated refuge upgraded. One-man guild authority recognized. Temporary barrier available. Cost, all stored stability compensation. I thought about Mason's coins. Then I thought about the people behind me. I paid. Gray barrier erupted from the mud shelf and spread along every path my territory had claimed. It was ugly, uneven, and full of holes shaped like bad memories, but when the storm tyrant's next hook struck, the barrier held. The solo players cheered. Mason pretended not to. The gray glow reached the tyrant's lowest chain joint. New interaction available. Hostile path redirection. I did not even read the warning. I activated it. The storm tyrant fired 6 chains at my banner. My territory bent their paths. Not away. Toward each other. Chains crossed, twisted, and knotted in midair. The fortress jerked sideways. Hooks slammed into the black feather walls. Bone ribs cracked. Purple lightning exploded across the sky. The storm tyrant let out a sound like a mountain being insulted. Every guild on the island stopped fighting. For one breath, thousands of people watched a weak solo player use a mud shelf to make a flying fortress punch itself. I wanted to enjoy it. Then the fortress fell. Not all the way, it dropped low enough that its shadow swallowed the bridge. The impact wind threw people off their feet. one of the smaller islands cracked and drifted away. The tyrant's central eye locked on me, and this time there was no reduced aggro, no confusion, no joke. It hated me. I could respect that. The monster opened its eye wider, and a beam of purple stormlight charged inside it. The target line ran straight through my banner, through my chest, and probably through my future. The barrier would not hold. I knew that instantly. The numbers flickered in front of me, and even without understanding all of them, I could smell failure. So I did not defend. I attacked the rule. The tyrant consumed neutral territories first. It targeted cores. My banner was the core, but my definition of belonging was anyone belonging nowhere. At that moment, the storm tyrant's own chains had been claimed as extensions of my path. The monster's lower hooks were trapped inside my boundary. Parts of it, by the tower's paperwork, were currently nowhere. Not fully monster, not fully territory, not fully owned. I slammed both hands on the blank banner stake. Then I redefined belonging. Anyone and anything rejected by its original owner may stand here until it chooses otherwise. The tower hesitated. That hesitation felt like the entire island holding its breath. The storm tyrant's broken chains glowed gray. Its torn feathers, snapped hooks, and cracked bone plates all shimmered. Rejected components recognized. Temporary salvage refuge expanded. The purple beam fired. At the same time, every broken piece of the tyrant that my territory had claimed pulled inward, forming a disgusting shield of feathers, chain links, mud, carts, and Mason's stolen banner. The beam hit the shield and carved through half of it. Heat blasted my face. My umbrella caught fire. The mud under my boots turned to glass. But the banner survived. I survived. And the tyrant had just spent its strongest attack destroying pieces of itself that now belonged to me. Extra loot ownership triggered. Salvage rights confirmed. The tower dropped an item into my inventory, so heavy I fell forward. Storm Tyrant Chain Core Fragment. I stared at the description. Allows temporary command of one detached chain from a Storm-class enemy. I looked up. One of the tyrant's chains hung loose, severed by its own beam, still thrashing like a metal snake. I raised my hand. The chain stopped. The entire island went silent again. Riley whispered that I had become a problem. I told him I had always been a problem. I was just affordable now. I pointed at the storm tyrant. The detached chain launched upward. It wrapped around the fortress's central bone rib and pulled. The tyrant resisted, wings of black cloud beating against the sky. The chain core fragment burned in my palm. My knees shook, my vision blurred. Commanding a storm chain felt like arm wrestling thunder while someone charged me interest. Rook grabbed my shoulder from behind and poured healing energy into me, not enough to make it easy, just enough to keep me from becoming soup. Mason planted his feet beside me and grabbed the chain with both hands even though he had no command over it. He pulled anyway, because Mason understood exactly one strategy, and this was finally the right moment for it. Vera raised her hand from the healing moss bed. Her guild could not enter my territory without political consequences, but she could order every archer under her command to shoot the same cracked bone rib. Arrows flew. Riley threw the frying pan. The pan missed the tyrant completely, bounced off a chain, and hit the cracked rib at the exact worst angle for the monster. The rib snapped. Riley immediately claimed it was intentional. Nobody argued because the sky was falling. The storm tyrant crashed into the island. The impact shattered 3 claimed territories and knocked half the guild banners flat. The food spring erupted like a geyser. The mana crystal vein exploded into glittering dust. The safe camp foundation became a less safe crater. My gray barrier cracked, but the refuge held because apparently mud, spite, and legal ambiguity were stronger than architecture. The tyrant was not dead. Of course it was not dead. Monsters that dramatic never died on the first crash. Its central eye rolled toward me. Its broken feathers rose like blades. Round the island, guilds recovered and immediately began moving in for the kill. Now that I had dragged the tyrant down, they wanted the final strike. Loot rights. That was the whole game. A dozen guild squads rushed forward, stepping over the people who had nearly died keeping the refuge standing. Their leaders shouted contribution claims. Their mages charged spells. Their assassins vanished into smoke, because assassins never walked anywhere like normal adults. I was exhausted, my hands shook. My umbrella was a burned stick. The chain core fragment was cracked. And I still had one advantage they did not understand. Lower enemy aggro did not make monsters blind. It made them prioritize bigger threats unless I directly attacked. Every guild on the island had just sprinted toward a wounded storm tyrant with weapons raised, screaming about loot. I stepped backward into my gray boundary and did nothing. The tyrant ignored me. It saw the guild charge. Then it got angry at the people with the biggest banners. The counterattack was beautiful in a horrible way. Black feathers shot outward like spears, chains swept the ground, purple lightning crawled across armor, guild formations broke in seconds, healers screamed, tanks became flying furniture. Mages forgot spells and discovered running. The tyrant did not kill them all, because guild barriers and expensive armor actually did something, but it scattered them hard enough to reset the battlefield. I waited 10 seconds. Abandoned items within boundary become unclaimed. The counterattack had thrown weapons, broken shields, potion belts, and spell cores across my expanded paths. I walked through the smoke with a limp and touched everything useful. Loot ownership confirmed. Loot ownership confirmed. Loot ownership confirmed. I picked up a spear that hummed with lightning, a shield that could unfold into a wall, 3 mana batteries, and 1 boot that increased jumping power, but only for the left foot. I put the boot on because I was past dignity. Then I ran at the tyrant. Well, I ran with 1 normal step and 1 explosive hop, which made me look like a heroic frog. The left boot launched me over a sweeping chain. I threw the returning dagger into a cracked bone plate. It bounced back. I threw it again while midair. The dagger hit the same crack. Again. Solo clear achievement progress increased. The tyrant's eye turned toward me. Direct attack registered, aggro rising. I had about 3 seconds before becoming paced. I used the unfolding shield wall. It opened in front of me like a metal door. The tyrant's feather blade slammed into it and launched me backward. Instead of fighting the knockback, I opened my burned umbrella skeleton and let the wind carry me over the mud shelf, across the bridge rail, and onto the tyrant's own fallen wing. The wing counted as battlefield terrain. Parts of the wing were broken. Broken parts counted as rejected by the original body. My territory definition smiled in the background like a lawyer with a knife. I slammed a claim nail into the wing. Gray light spread across the black feathers. The tyrant screamed again. Hostile path redirection available. I redirected the feather blades. Every feather on the claimed section flipped backward. The tyrant tried to impale me with its wing, and I made the wing stab the ground instead, pinning itself in place. The guild saw the opening and rushed again. I shouted not to. They did not listen. Of course they did not listen. To them, I was still the weak solo player, even after I had turned a storm fortress into a tangled necklace. They thought openings belonged to whoever grabbed them first. The tyrant's second wing rose. This time Vera reacted faster than the others. Her archers shot warning arrows into the dirt in front of the charging squads, forcing them to slow down. Mason, still limping, shoved 3 players back with his shield and yelled that anyone who rushed would get everyone killed. That was when I realized something strange. They were not following me, but they were starting to understand my rhythm. I did not need an army. I needed people to stop ruining the trap before it closed. The tyrant prepared to lift off. If it reached the sky again, my territory would be ripped apart. The chain core fragment had 1 command left, maybe 2 if I was willing to bleed from the eyes, and I was not completely against it but preferred alternatives. I checked my inventory while sliding down the pinned wing. Returning dagger, lightning spear, mana batteries, broken umbrella, claim nails, 1 left jumping boot, whether apology flute destroyed, several potions, spoon crown legally disbarred. Mason's stolen banner, currently wrapped around the stake, decoy banner scraps, mud in bottles from Riley's scam business. Mud in bottles. I almost laughed. Riley had been scooping mud from my territory into tiny bottles and selling it as lucky sovereign soil. It was stupid. It was useless. It was technically part of my territory when bottled inside the boundary. Maybe it was not useless. I yelled for Riley. He popped up from behind a cart and said all sales were final. I told him to throw every mud bottle at the tyrant. He asked if this was marketing. I said it was either marketing or survival. He threw the bottles. So did the solo players. Dozens of tiny bottles arced through the air and shattered across the tyrant's body. Mud splattered over feathers, bones, chains, and the central eye's outer shell. For a second, nothing happened. Then the gray glow flickered in spots all over the monster. Territory fragments detected. Temporary microboundaries unstable. I shoved mana batteries into the blank banner stake until it smoked. Stabilize all fragments, I thought. The tower asked for a cost. My solo achievement points flashed. I had been saving them because every achievement point could buy permanent upgrades. Spending them on temporary mud splatter was objectively stupid. That was why nobody expected it. I paid. The gray mud spots stabilized. For one breath, the storm tyrant was covered in tiny pieces of my territory. Hostile misdirection applied in fragmented zones. The tyrant tried to flap its free wing. Half the feathers went up. Half went down. 3 bone ribs twisted left, 2 chains pulled right. Its central eye charged a beam and aimed at me, but the mud splatter on its eyelid misdirected the angle by a few inches. The beam shot past me, across the island, and struck the largest pile of abandoned guild weapons. The weapons exploded. Shrapnel flew into the tyrant's exposed core. Solo contribution increased. Final strike eligibility established. Every guild leader on the island screamed. I could not hear the words, but I understood the emotion. It was the sound of rich people watching a discount coupon become a crown. The tyrant staggered. Its central eye cracked. The tower displayed a final opportunity window. Storm Tyrant Core exposed. Only eligible contributors may attempt binding strike. Eligible contributors, Logan. I stared at the message. Then I looked at Mason, Vera, Brooke, and Riley. Mason was bruised, furious, and still holding the line so greedy guilds could not interrupt. Vera was directing arrows with terrifying precision. Brooke was healing people from every side because her conscience had no guild border. Riley was selling tickets to the end of the world while throwing mud with both hands. The tower called me the only eligible contributor because I had refused every party window. That was the rule. But being solo did not mean pretending nobody mattered. It meant nobody owned my choices. I gripped the lightning spear and the returning dagger together. I tied the dagger's cord to the spear's shaft. I attached the last claim nail to the spearhead. Then I jammed the cracked chain core fragment into the weapon until lightning crawled across my arm. My left boot charged. I crouched. The tyrant's eye focused on me. Brooke shouted something I could not hear over the storm. Vera raised her bow. Mason lifted his shield. Riley threw one final mud bottle and missed so badly it hit me in the back. The mud splashed over my coat. Territory contact confirmed. I burst out laughing. The left boot launched me like a drunk cannonball. A chain swung at my head. Mason slammed it aside with his shield and got thrown across the mud. Vera's arrows struck the tyrant's cracked eyelid, holding it open for half a second. Brooke's healing light wrapped around my arm, keeping the lightning from burning it off. Riley's mud on my back kept a tiny piece of my territory attached to me as I left the ground. I was still solo. But I was not alone. I drove the spear into the storm tyrant's exposed core. The claim nail punched through first. The returning dagger snapped forward and struck the same point. The chain core fragment released its last command. Redirect inward. Every misdirected chain, feather, spark, and broken bone fragment turned toward the tyrant's own core. The storm collapsed into itself. For 1 second, I saw the entire fortress fold like a paper lantern being crushed by invisible hands. Purple light flashed. The world went silent. Then the storm tyrant burst apart into rain, feathers, coins, crystal shards, and one enormous black hook that slammed into the ground inches from my face. I landed badly. I mean I hit the mud, bounced, rolled through a puddle, and stopped with my left boot stuck over my head. Very heroic, extremely majestic. Nobody was allowed to describe it accurately. The tower announced the clear. Storm Tyrant defeated. Solo binding strike confirmed. One-man guild achievement awakened. Neutral refuge preserved. Territory war phase 1 concluded. Reward distribution calculating. The silence after that announcement was heavier than the storm. Every guild waited. I waited too, mostly because I could not feel my spine and wanted to know if I had earned a new one. The reward window opened. First came experience. Too much experience. It hit me like hot water poured into my bones. My level jumped once, twice, 5 times, then kept going until the numbers blurred. My weak body did not become huge. I did not suddenly grow Mason's ridiculous shoulders. Instead, everything sharpened. My breathing steadied. My hands stopped shaking. My eyes tracked falling raindrops like they were slow coins. My thoughts moved faster, cleaner, crueler. Solo bonus stack evolved. Then came loot. The guilds had expected a split based on damage, support, tanking, healing, and final strike. But the tower followed the rules it had written, and I had spent the entire fight turning the battlefield into my personal lost and found. Primary loot ownership, Logan. Gasps rippled across the island. Secondary salvage rights, unaffiliated refuge. The solo players behind me received small reward windows. Potions, coins, food tokens, minor skills, protective charms. Not enough to make them kings, enough to make them stand straighter. Guild contribution rewards reduced due to non-party interference and failed claim attempts. That sentence caused more emotional damage than the monster. The largest guild leaders started shouting immediately. They called it unfair. They called it a bug. They called me a thief. The tower ignored them because none of those words were legal categories. I sat up slowly and opened my loot list. Storm Tyrant Hook. Stormfold Cloak. Chain Command Skill Lesser. Territory Seed Gray Refuge. Title gained One-Man Guild. Passive awakened Hidden Bonus Consolidation. I touched the title first. One-Man Guild allowed me to access certain guild functions without members, as long as I personally fulfilled the leadership burden. Guild storage became solo storage. Guild barrier became personal territory barrier. Guild raid entry became possible if I cleared the minimum danger contribution alone. Guild diplomacy became available, though the description warned that diplomacy performed by a solo leader may cause confusion, resentment, and attempted murder. So normal diplomacy. Hidden bonus consolidation was even better. All my solo bonuses, which had been scattered like loose change in my status, fused into one growing ability. Independent advantage. Scaled whenever I overcame content while unaffiliated, refused unfair contracts, survived resource denial, or defeated enemies with fewer allies than expected. It improved shop discounts, loot priority, enemy targeting, achievement rewards, and territory effects. It also added a new line that made me stop breathing for a second. Clever rule exploitation may generate improvised bonuses. I whispered that the tower should not have told me that. Riley, lying face down in the mud beside me, asked if I had gotten something good. I said I had gotten permission to become worse. He gave me a thumbs up without lifting his head. Then the guild leaders arrived. Not running, not shouting, walking carefully, like the mud might remember their unpaid insults and charge interest. Their banners were torn, their armor was dented, and every one of them stared at the Storm Tyrant Hook in my territory like it was supposed to belong to someone richer. The loudest leader demanded fair distribution. I asked what part of the word solo had confused him. He said everyone had contributed. I looked past him at the crater, where most of the guilds had charged in only after I dragged the monster out of the sky. I looked at the wrecked carts, the broken bridge, the injured solo players, and Mason pretending he had not helped because apparently emotional honesty made his muscles itch. Then I opened the loot window and turned it around so everyone could see the tower's decision. Primary ownership, Logan. Secondary salvage rights, unaffiliated refuge. The leader's mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to file a complaint. Vera stepped beside me and said the ruling was clear. Brooke stood on my other side and said anyone starting another fight could heal themselves with confidence and dirt. Riley held up a handmade sign that said arguments cost 2 coins. Mason glanced at it, nodded once, and stood in front of my banner with his bent shield. For the first time, the guild leaders did not see a weak solo player. They saw a road, a refuge, a territory core, a storm hook, a healer who would not move, a strategist who had already calculated their mistakes, a scammer with a ledger, and a bruiser who looked ready to turn somebody into bridge decoration. They saw a one-man guild that had somehow become harder to attack than a real one. The tower did not let the silence last. The crown platform rose from the center of the battlefield, pushing through the crater where the storm tyrant had fallen. On top of it floated a crown made of black feathers, crystal, and chain links. It looked expensive, cursed, and deeply uncomfortable. Territory War final claim begins. The leader who holds the crown platform for 5 minutes may establish one island law. Every guild leader forgot their injuries at the same time. One law was worth more than loot. One law could decide who used roads, who received healing, who owed taxes, who could claim resources, and who got thrown into danger first with a polite title slapped on top. I saw the calculation move across their faces. They did not need to defeat me forever. They just needed the crown for 5 minutes. The rush began. Guild squads sprinted for the crater from every direction, but every route crossed my gray paths. Toll notices flashed. Misdirection bent charges sideways. Claim nails hidden under mud shifted the safest road 3 feet left, sending a whole spear line into a ditch I had bought during the storm fight and forgotten about. Forgetting about your own trap sounded bad, but remembering it at the perfect moment felt like genius with poor organization. Vera's archers pinned boots to the ground without drawing blood. Brooke dragged wounded fighters into the free lane whether they had attacked us or not, because she had the inconvenient habit of being better than the rest of us. Riley ran behind the front line, yelling about emergency tolls, and some panicked players actually paid him while being chased. Mason guarded the original banner stake under the bridge. He shouted that he was only standing there because the view was good. The view was mud and a cracked wall. I let him have the lie. Loud Leader reached the crown platform first by throwing 2 of his own people across a gap and stepping on their shields. The crown timer started above his head. He raised both hands and announced that his island law would place all unaffiliated players under mandatory guild protection until they proved useful. Protection. That old word again. People always used soft words when they wanted chains to sound warm. I could have challenged him directly, but direct challenges were what strong people expected. Instead, I opened the fair witness function and filed an emergency dispute. Claim, Crown candidate is attempting to write a law over unaffiliated players while standing on access roads maintained by the unaffiliated refuge without consent or paid passage. The timer paused. The entire battlefield froze. The Loud Leader stared at the floating window like it had slapped him. The tower requested evidence. I submitted toll records, abandoned supply claims, healing lane logs, and 3 separate clips of him calling my territory worthless before using it to reach the platform. Riley supplied a ledger so detailed it made the tower sparkle with bureaucratic joy. The leader shouted that I was making a mockery of the Crown event. I said no, I was respecting its paperwork. The fair witness seal glowed. Valid dispute. Settle access debt or surrender claim. He refused. His boots disappeared again. I did not know why the tower liked taking his boots, but I supported consistent branding. The platform tilted, and he slid off into the same ditch his spear line had fallen into. His own squad looked down at him, then looked at me, then suddenly became very interested in not helping. I stepped onto the platform. The crown timer began for me. The next 5 minutes felt longer than the entire apocalypse. Guilds attacked in waves. The Stormfold cloak swallowed fireballs and spat them into empty ground. The Lesser Chain Command dragged abandoned shields into walls. My left boot launched me over a spear thrust so hard I kicked a banner pole by accident and knocked 3 players into a toll zone. Every trick I had learned came back at once. Cheap shop items, loot ownership. Lower aggro, misdirection, refuge rules, legal nonsense sharpened into a blade. A mage tried to blind me with golden light. I bought a dramatic spotlight and placed it behind him. His own shadow jumped in front of his spell, and the light bounced into his squad. I had no idea shadows could do that. Independent Advantage generated a tiny window that said improvised theatrics bonus. I accepted it because refusing free nonsense seemed ungrateful. 30 seconds remained when the Loud Leader crawled out of the ditch with a knife and ran for my original banner stake. I could not leave the platform. If I stepped off, the timer reset. Mason saw him. For one breath, the old Mason might have laughed and let the weak solo player lose everything. This Mason threw his bent shield like a discus. The shield hit the leader in the back and flattened him into the mud. Riley immediately charged him a landing fee. Brooke yelled at Mason for reopening his wounds while healing him anyway. Vera fired one final arrow that pinned the leader's sleeve to the ground. The timer reached 0. Crown claimed. The crystal crown floated down into my hands. It was cold, light, and dangerous in the quiet way rules were always dangerous. The tower asked me to define one island law. Guild leaders stared, waiting for revenge. Maybe they thought I would ban guilds. Maybe they thought I would tax them until their grandchildren felt it. Maybe they thought I would force everyone to call me King of Mud, which I considered for exactly 1 second before deciding Riley would enjoy it too much. I wrote one sentence. No player may be denied basic passage, emergency healing, or earned loot ownership on this island because they lack a guild. The tower accepted. Gray light spread across the entire floating island. It ran through roads, bridges, camps, springs, barricades, and crater walls. It did not destroy guild banners. It did not erase territories. It did not make everyone equal, because a single law could not fix every ugly thing people carried inside them. But it opened the roads. It opened the healing lanes. It made earned loot harder to steal from someone just because they stood alone. For the rejected players behind me, that was not small. Some of them cheered, some cried, some just read the law over and over like they were afraid it would vanish if they blinked. Mason walked up, covered in mud, and said my law was annoying. I said freedom usually was. He's held out a hand. I checked for hidden contracts before shaking it. There were none. Brooke called me paranoid. I said alive paranoid. Vera looked up as the ascent gate opened above the crown platform, a stairway formed from storm clouds and crystal steps rising toward the next floor. The island behind us was ruined, repaired, humbled, and somehow better than when the war began. My refuge remained below the bridge, still ugly, still muddy, still charging tolls to anyone who could afford them and giving free passage to anyone who could not. The tower displayed my next condition preview. The second island chain recognizes noble houses, merchant alliances, and beast contracts. Unregistered independents may be treated as wild claimants. Wild claimants receive adaptive bonus. I read the last line twice. Then I started smiling. Brooke asked what that face meant. Riley asked if he should prepare a toll booth. Mason asked if he was going to regret climbing near me. Vera sighed before I even answered. I stepped onto the first stair with the stormfold cloak moving like rain behind me, the broken umbrella over one shoulder, the storm tyrant hook dragging sparks at my side, and the one-man guild title glowing quietly in. My status. I had entered the tower as the guy nobody wanted. Now the roads had my law, the guilds knew my name, and the next floor was already offering bonuses for staying impossible to categorize. Everyone else climbed by joining something powerful. I climbed by becoming the loophole power had to walk around. And if the nobles, merchants, and beast tamers on the next floor wanted to treat me like a wild claimant, that was fine. Wild things did not wait to be invited.